This next section, I'd like to explain how we apply NAT when we do it with static rules, where the administrator statically sets the global address and the local address so that users on the outside of our network in our global side of our network can reach devices on our local side of the network. I'm going to use the same exact example I used from the previous module. Here I have an internet PC that wants to browse to a web server. We can assume this is our Star Wars fanboy again, trying to get to our Global Mantix web server that has all that Star Wars memorabilia on it. Now I've already set up my access rule to allow the internet PC to come in and get to the web server. The problem is that in the previous module we did not talk about NAT yet, so I made an assumption that the internet PC could route to 192.168.10.10. The reality is that that PC cannot route to that network, so we need to set up a static translation so that the internet PC has a global address to reach our web server on the local network. So we'll establish our local inside network as the side that the web server is on, and our global outside network as the side that the internet PC is on. We need to know what IP addresses our internet service provider gave us. Now we're a small business and we have a 198.18.42.2/28 IP address on our outside interface with a default gateway set of 198.18.42.1, which means that I've used up 2 IP addresses in my /28 range. My /28 range has addresses 42.1 through 42.14. I've used 2 of those, which means that I have 42.3 through 42.14 available for me to use. So what I can do here is I can create a static NAT rule that says my global address is 198.18.42.8, going to my local address of 192.168.10.10. So I have my message. Our Star Wars fanboy wants to get to our website, so he puts in the destination IP address of 198.18.42.8. That gets forwarded to the firewall. We see that there is a rule to translate the 198.18.42.8 into 192.168.10.10. Once we do our NAT translation, then we can check our access rule. Our access rule says that we are legit. We can pass through the firewall, and now we can forward our message onto the web server. Now you should notice something here. This particular firewall, the way I have it configured, it processes NAT first, then it processes the access rule. On the firewall that you work with, you're going to have to find out what order your particular firewall operates. Some firewalls will make you put the access rule in using the global address. Others are going to make you use the local address. And it all depends upon when that NAT is happening, because that access rule is looking exactly in the packet and segment headers. NAT can modify those, so we have to make sure that we have the right order of application of this. All right, now back to NAT. Our web server got the message. The web server can now reply to the message, send it back to the firewall. The firewall will then take the private address out, replace it with our global address, and forward it on to our fanboy out on the internet. So there's how static NAT operates. Static NAT isn't always that simple though. A lot of us have in our home networks a situation where we only have one single IP address to use. So here my ISP gave me 198.18.42.2/30. which means I have .1 and .2 to use on my network. .1 is the router for my internet service provider, and .2 is me. So now if I want that internet PC to reach my web server, I don't have any extra addresses on my untrusted zone or my global network to use. What that means is I can actually reuse the IP address on my outside interface. And this is something called port forwarding, but it's actually a form of static NAT. And what we do here is we say if we receive a message on our outside interface that has a global address of 198.18.42.2, the same as the IP address on our untrusted interface of our firewall, but it also has a destination port of 80. When those two characteristics match, then forwarded on to our inside local device. Sometimes we may have already used port 80 on the outside interface, or we need it for something else. And with Static NAT port forwarding, we can actually change our global port number to be whatever we want it to be. So we could make our internet PC user out there, our Star Wars fanboy, we could make him browse to a website that's at 198.18.42.2 on port 8080 to allow that user to get back into the web server. And I'll show you exactly how this works in a demonstration so that we can see that we browse to the website on the internet side to a strange port number, but we're still accessing the web server on port 80 on the inside of our network.